we're going to get a new object from our object pool and store a reference to it in new button, right? So let's just take a quick look at simple object pool at that method, right? So we have here our function get object. It returns a game object. So we have in here, we have a game object variable called spawn game object, and we're going to check if there's an inactive instance of the prefab ready to return, we're going to return that, right? If there isn't, we're going to spawn one using instantiate. We're going to create a new one. And then we're going to add that to, we're going to add a pooled object component to it so that we know which pool it came from, and set a reference to this script in that pooled object. And pooled object is down here at the bottom. It just literally just holds this reference to the object pool that spawned it. And then we are going to set the parent to null and set it to inactive, right? Or sorry, we're going to set the parent to null and activate the object, right? Because this is the spawning one. And then we're going to return that object. So once we've got our object from the pool, we are going to pull up my notes here again. Parent it to the content panel, right? So we're going to say new button dot transform dot set parent. Can't type content panel. So by parenting it to the content panel has the vertical layout group on it, and so this new button is now going to be added to our vertical layout and thereby laid out and arranged correctly. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to tell the button to set itself up. So we're going to declare a sample button variable called sample button, and we're going to set it to equal new button dot get component sample button. So we're going to get a reference to that sample button script that we attached to our sample button prefab, and then we're going to call sample button dot setup, right? And that's why I wanted to just have that stub of a function there, just so I could call it now. And what we're going to do is we're going to pass in our item and a reference to this shop scroll list, right? So let's jump back over to our sample button and add in the sample button the parameters so that it can accept that. So setup is going to take an item called current item, and it's going to take a shop scroll list called current scroll list. And so in setup, we're going to set item. Oh, and we need to add to private variable. So we're going to have a private item called item and a private shop scroll list called scroll list. So in setup, we're going to then set item to equal current item, the item that was passed in when the function was called. And we're going to set name label dot text to equal item dot item name, right? So basically what we're doing now is we've passed in our data class item, which has the name, the price, and the icon image. And now we're going to display that data on our name label, price label, and icon image, right? So we are going to then set price label dot text to equal price, item dot price dot toString, and we're going to set icon image dot sprite to equal item dot icon. And lastly, we're going to set the scroll list of our sample button to equal current scroll list. And so this way, our button knows what list it currently belongs to. And we're going to use that when we set up our interactivity in a second. So let's save the changes to the sample button, save the changes to all of our scripts, convert. And so before we can test, we just need to have something call our add buttons function, and we're going to have a intermediate function here, another private function that returns void called refresh display. And so this is going to be called every time something changes, right? If we buy an item or sell an item or the game starts, we're going to call refresh display. And for now, we're just going to call add buttons. And we're going to call refresh display from start. So now what we should be able to do is when we start, we should be able to display a list of buttons that don't yet do anything. But we have at least the building of the list working. And before I continue, let's take a look. So we're going to jump over to the editor, set up our items, and do a couple more things. But before I do that, let's take a look at the chat and see how you guys are doing. Somebody is asking if the pool is the same as the prefab. The pool is a system which is going to allow us to recycle game objects so that we don't have to instantiate and destroy them. So it's a way that we can use as many instances of a game object or as many copies of a prefab as we need without sort of being wasteful about using instantiate and destroy, because the issue with using instantiate and destroy constantly is that both of them allocate a little bit of memory, which can trigger garbage collection, which can interfere with the performance of your game while it's running. So, you know, if you have a very simple setup, you could probably get away with instantiate and destroy. But if you start having lots of items and lots of clicking around in the menus, you probably want to use the object pooling pattern that we've shown here.